A great blinking red emergency transmission burned across each and every alien command post. Alert! We have a warship of unknown origin engaged. Our lines are breaking. The alien admirals had laughed at the suggestion that humans would be able to resist. Now their whole strategy was on the verge of chaos. The Unthari Empire was the greatest power in the Orion Quadrant, and possibly beyond. They held the iron grip over dozens of star systems for over 5 centuries. Their war sigils, bearing the stylized three-claw insignia, were raised on conquered worlds. Will of Emperor Satrak Mzen filled countless sectors, enforced by an armada that dwarfed all the lesser species' combined forces. Planet-killing dreadnoughts and hyper-advanced strike cruisers guarded trade routes, and the Unthari Overwatch swept the cosmos for signs of rebellion. It was commonly accepted that the empires might win unchallenged. Smaller civilizations, many of them technologically stagnant, half-vassals, leashed with gold and steel, bent the knee. Some, such as the Pira or the Clamor, offered tribute in precious metals or rare crystals. Others offered tribute populations as labor. A handful, like the insectoid Thalix, put up a fight for a little while before being bombarded into submission. In the face of such overwhelming displays of brutality, any concept of standing up to the Unthari felt like suicide. And then there was humanity, dispersed and in shadow. Earth, their homeworld, was nestled in a distant cluster of stars far away from the Unthari capital. Humanity, over the centuries, had mastered just enough warp technology to reach a mere handful of stars. By the time they encountered the Unthari, however, the imbalance in their relative power was obvious. Instead, they were a minor species, mocked by the Empire, unevolved, lacking resources, unworthy of diplomatic engagement. For a while, humans suffered in the Empire's shadow, tenaciously free only because they were too mundane to justify the expense of conquering. But the Unthari intelligence networks found that humans were less rudimentary than outward markings indicated. There were isolated rumors that pockets of humanity also worked in secret, perfecting the advanced tech they had learned over centuries of VHS footage of alien expansions. Rumors circulated that they were harnessing energy unknown to the rest of us. Yet most Imperial admirals dismissed these rumors as nothing more than hearsay. The galactic balance of power shifted when a ragtag band of humans on the remote mining colony Tantalus IV refused to pay tribute. Enraged, the Unthari High Command called for unconditional surrender. The Latino human governor wouldn't, and the Empire's punishment was fast and ruthless. A firestorm of assault frigates bombarded the surface of Tantalus IV into little more than charred rubble. By morning, Tantalus IV had become a horrific warning of what happened to those who defied the Empire's authority. But the fall of Tantalus IV had also ignited something new. Open rebellion among the dispersed human worlds, under the banner of a secret organization calling itself the United Terran Front. Their leaders, who had once been disparate and pragmatic, united under one undeniable truth. The Unthari intended to eradicate any future threat from humanity. In the long run, humans would go extinct if they did not battle now. Despite efforts from some Terran colonies to stay neutral, the largest of enclaves concentrated their resources, building secret shipyards, allying themselves with the sympathetic alien races similarly suffering under the Empire, and turbocharging research efforts once considered pipe dreams. For the Empire, the uprising was an annoyance, a mosquito buzzing a colossus. This conflict also fell under the command of Supreme Admiral Kevith, leader of the Unthari Western Fleet, whose mission would be to stamp out the scattered human holdouts. Hundreds of warships organized over numerous star systems constituted the Western Fleet. For Kevith and his admirals, it would be a matter of gathering the forces they needed, back the warships into the last bastions of human resistance, and boil the bastards away once and for all. The ultimate attack was to be mounted near Veridon's Maw, an anomalous area of space where drifting asteroid fields and subspace rifts conspired to make navigation difficult. Scouts had reported that a large group of flesh-organic rebels had taken refuge on planets in the Veridon star system, where they had established clandestine bases. Kevith's strategy was straightforward: sever escape routes, deploy enough cruisers and battleships to neutralize any surface defenses, and land shock troops to occupy or destroy the offending colonies. Casualties on the Unthari side were likely to be low. After all, how could humans afford to resist an Imperial battle group? The Unthari admirals and generals wore faces of casual confidence in the High Command's briefing chambers. Star charts around Veridon's maw spun across holographic projections. Brilliant red arrows marked the Empire's proposed routes of incursion. It was all spread out as a game board. They spoke openly. Human vessels are not equipped with advanced shielding. They will shatter under direct engagement. We suspect only a token orbital defense around each target world. Any talk of advanced Terran prototypes is nonsense. Our intelligence indicates large-scale capital ship construction has never begun. Put simply, the Empire believed the ultimate rally against humanity would be just as simple as any other conquest. Time and again, their near invincibility had been proven. But as they mobilized, the humans on Veridon's maw realized that confronting the Western fleet head-on would amount to suicide. They had no choice but to resort to guile, deception, and, if the fates allowed, whatever the last of their secret project hoped to deliver, a rumored super warship that went by the code name Solaris Dawn. And so, among the insurgent Terran enclaves, tales of Solaris Dawn had become legends. They say the ship was built from stolen Unthari technology, pieces from every advanced race they could scavenge, and radical quantum engineering done in isolation. No one, not even many rebel leaders, knew exactly what capabilities they had. Most thought it was just a pipe dream. But as the Empire readied its final sweep, the battered human survivors prayed in unison that the rumors were true. Somewhere in the darkness of Veridon's maw, a secret shipyard shone amongst the swirling cosmic dust. Inside it, a sleek vessel with an obsidian hull was being checked for its final systems. Her commanding officer, Captain Nadia Solis, had walked the corridors with an iron will. She had devoted her entire career to the United Terran Fleet and had witnessed colony after colony fall under its boot. This was her opportunity, and humanity's, to change the course of history. If the Solaris Dawn could strike the Unthari at its weakest moment, maybe the unyielding tide of conquest could be slowed or shattered. As serious as these preparations were, not a lone Unthari admiral suspected there could even be such a craft. They laughed at the idea that humans posed any real threat. The day of the final assault came with the usual pride of the alien command. Fleets all over the Veridon system were entering forays, escort carriers made to cover their fighter wings, and battleships the shape of a blockade. Planet-based resistances prepared for the worst, searching the void for any glimmer of hope. Admiral Kevith and his staff watched the invasion progress in his flag fleet's war room, holograms displaying the invasion progress. In the initial scans, they'd seen only token planetary defenses, just as they'd expected. And just as the admirals were finalizing the approach vectors, an alarm blared across the entire comm net. All Unthari battle stations, emergency alert. Unknown human warship joins the battle in Sector Gamma. All command units, prepare for immediate status updates. At first, Kevith laughed. Some other human patrol frigate, maybe? Or a battered destroyer. Hardly worth the fuss. But almost immediately, the first reports of confusion and panic started coming in. The Unthari's belief did not disappear at once, but a grain of uncertainty was sown. It wasn't a surprise they had made in centuries against a lesser species. What was happening? It was the perfect scene for a confrontation no one in the galaxy thought was possible. The world building was established, an arrogant alien empire on the verge of overwhelming victory, human defenders bloodied and desperate, and a rumored advanced warship poised to make an appearance. What was left to discover was how quickly the unimaginable could rip apart the Empire's meticulously laid plans. As the alarm blared through Unthari channels, Admiral Kevith shouted at his comm officers, "Identify that craft immediately, and connect me to the forward formations." He marched to the front of the flagship's command deck, squinting at the main view screen. Data trickled in, some contradictory, some incomplete. The only agreement they could muster came from a single human craft, which had skirted from behind the whirling asteroid field that lay tucked behind Veridon's maw to cleave the Empire's flanks with speeds that were nothing short of miraculous. Unthari ships scrambled to react across the system. The mat-mounted forward formations that had been approaching planetary orbit halted mid-maneuver. Their admirals called for clarity. They had expected little resistance, a few old Terran corvettes, maybe some orbital cannons. Instead, sensor scans returned a powerful warship signature. To make matters worse, their communications nets began to experience interference, as if the interloper was jamming or taking over channels. Back on the Solaris Dawn's bridge, Captain Nadia Solis braced herself against the central command console, heart racing. This was it, the culmination of a lifetime of training and sacrifice. Lieutenant Mahir checked the incoming tactical data against Icarus, the advanced AI system at her side. Readouts showed a swarm of Unthari battleships and carriers, hanging in a ring around the core planets. Collateral forces of humanity appeared as motes. But the Solaris Dawn was no typical Terran ship. Constructed from a modified, stealth-minded hull, it featured layered energy shielding scavenged from pilfered Unthari prototypes. It did have a micro-warp drive in her propulsion system that enabled it to fuck away short distances in real space. Immediate repositioning. Most important of all, the ship's primary armament included a hyperlance cannon that could supposedly punch through even dreadnought armor. Captain, Lieutenant Mahir said, his face aglow with a cocktail of excitement and fear. The central fleet of the Empire is maneuvering to intercept. Several warships approaching. We are outnumbered some 100 to 1. Nadia inhaled. Then we better make this first strike count. Initiate jamming protocols on the nearest command vessel. Let's show them we're not an easy hit. Unthari cruisers closed rapidly, pouring forth torrents of plasma torpedoes from their ships, intending to vaporize the Terran warship in one fell swoop. The Solaris Dawn arced into evasive maneuvers. Automated thrusters flared in synchrony, weaving the dreadnought between salvos. Overlapping energy shields absorbed glancing blows. The lead cruiser's shield cracked and splintered under the pain of one perforating shot from the hyperlance cannon, the devastating sliver ripping its hull to pieces from prow to stern in retaliation. It detonated with a deafening blast. Unthari ships nearby reeled at the display of destructive power. From Admiral Kevith's vantage, the encounter was surreal. How could one Terran craft single-handedly snipe an Imperial cruiser with a single shot? Kevith demanded more data. His subcommanders rushed to reposition fleets, but the channels went static. The humans somehow scrambled command frequencies. The conflict escalated. Fleet-wide, the Empire's rank-and-file ships struggled as communications failed. Admiral Kevith had tried to route orders through backup channels, but many outlying vessels had only received partial instructions. Some thought that a massive human armada was on the way, and others freaked at the sudden appearance of an unknown supership. Amidst the confusion, whole squadrons of Unthari went off mission entirely, unable to determine whether they should continue with the planetary bombardment or engage the new threat. Over the hours, Choas blossomed inside the Imperial lines. The Solaris Dawn took advantage of this confusion. Captain, Solis ordered a micro-warp jump strategically across the plane of the system. The drive was also a carper to space for a few moments, so the warship was able to disappear from one spot and rematerialize hundreds of clicks away, right behind the main formation of the battleship. Unthari gunners, who had been scanning to either side of them, found the Terran dreadnought had reoriented itself to their rear. The Solaris Dawn's secondary rail batteries unleashed a volley of fire that strung two battleships out of formation. Meanwhile, the AI Icarus executed a subroutine, hijacking more of the Empire's communications channels. Screens glared half-encoded Terran signals on dozens of ships bearing Unthari hulls. Infiltration of command code forced the Empire's command hierarchy to fall back on ancient short-range redundancies. Nearly all captains were effectively severed from Admiral Kevith's orders. Episodically, the Unthari battle lines grew distant. A few captains continued to be in deadlock focus on surfacing attacks. Others recognized too late their out-of-position support of one another. Kevith tried to regroup the core fleets into a protective perimeter, but the Solaris Dawn kept disappearing and reappearing at will and delivering punishing strikes. Sensing the order disintegrate, Admiral Kevith shouted at his staff, "Reroute all command encryption to frequency Delta 9. This is not possible. I refuse to allow a single Terran ship to ruin an entire campaign." Saliva sprayed from his mandibles as he hammered the hollow table. But the reaction from his subordinates was uneven. Some ships had even lost the flagship's signal entirely. At the far reaches of the system, slice by slice Hanno-Terran rebels came out of hiding and caused small waves. With the Empire's blockade in disarray, humans saw opportunities to attack scattered or isolated Unthari vessels. Once purely defensive, improvised corvettes swarmed forward to harry the Empire's logistical support vessels. The planet-side guerrilla forces had trained their meager orbital cannons toward the sky and were picking off destroyers that had lost contact with command. The once mighty Unthari Western Fleet had become a gout of local skirmishes. With tension reaching a boiling point, the Solaris Dawn dealt blow after blow. Captain Solis had tracked a massive Unthari carrier that was thought to have thousands of strike craft on board and had engaged. The Terran dreadnought's hyperlance sliced through the carrier's deck shields, igniting a chain reaction of detonations throughout its flight base. Shock waves radiated out, causing nearby frigates to scatter. Admiral Kevith stood at a distance, observing one of his prized carriers, Vanquish, was it, splitting apart in an explosion. The aura of irresistible self-assuredness began to fracture at the highest echelons of Unthari leadership. Alien communications, also compromised, descended into panic. Others called for a retreat at once to regroup. Others kept demanding that the attack be pursued, asserting that there must be limits to the Terran ship's capabilities. Some even suspected a trap. Could there be more warships behind the wings? The chain of command had fractured. Kevith's efforts to mastermind a decisive counterstrike crumbled when supportive relay ships went dark under the Solaris Dawn's attack. Amid the carnage, a beacon of hope radiated through the ravaged human colonies on Veridon's maw. Unthari ships turning their backs on the planet in a frenzied reaction to the frightening new Terran menace saw plumes of fire across the world's orbit. On the ground, rebel leaders communicated in disbelief. We have a chance. The Empire's lines are shattered. Send whatever fighters we have remaining that's left. Imperial starfighters scrambled into the maelstrom, but they found the defensive blockade too disordered to put up an effective fight. Diving back into the thick of it, Captain Solis felt the fatigue of managing so many advanced systems. The microwarp drive required massive output from the reactor and had the engineers cycling power from other sectors. The jamming suite strained the ship's computing arrays, and the hyperlance overheated under repeated discharge. They had to pace themselves judiciously, or the Solaris Dawn would overreach and leave itself open to counterattack. It was a high-stakes tightrope walk the entire mission. But every risk paid off as the alien command structure unraveled further. Admiral Kevith's higher-ups had ceased following his panicked commands and prioritized their own survival. Some attempted to create ad hoc alliances with other Imperial vessels, while others just fled the system, terrified to be singled out by the dreadnought. Across the kingdom, fleets of star ships blocked in their harbors as word spread of the new wave of the unstoppable force of conquest that had come before the Terrans. Solis recognized an opening. If they could shoot the flagship, Kevith's seat of power, the chain of command might unravel outright. But finding it within all the swirling chaos wasn't simple. The flagship's transponder switched frequencies every few minutes, but the Terran artificial intelligence Icarus was homing in on possible signal sources. In a lull in the fighting, the AI pinged a likely match, a big, heavily shielded capital ship waiting in the wrecked cruiser's shadow. That had to be Kevith's seat of command. Lieutenant Mahir, liaise with Icarus. Prepare a micro-warp jump suit behind the primary suspect, Solis said. If we can isolate Kevith, we can perhaps force the entire Western Fleet to collapse. Understood, Captain, Mahir replied. Aligning coordinates. Transferring power to the warp coils. Stand by for jump in 10 seconds. The Solaris Dawn turned aside from a dented cruiser, swirling light sheathing its hull. Zapped with jamming, alien sensors also had a hard time tracking the abrupt spike in warp energies. In a blink of warped starlight, the Terran warship vanished, then reappeared moments later within firing distance of Kevith's flagship, the harrowing spear. Kevith had only moments to react. All batteries, target that ship, he screamed. But, in the chaos of the battlefield, the harrowing spear had little support. Spitting plasma, the dreadnought's turrets slammed into the Terran shields. In response to the onslaught, Solaris Dawn acted with furious elegance. The hyperlance fired, the tip of the main gun glowing with savage energy. Crackling energy sizzled through the vacuum outside as warships unleashed punishing volleys at each other. Each direct hit made the Terran shields flicker as the panels strained under the harrowing spear's heavier firepower. Inside the Solaris Dawn, alarms screamed, deck plates vibrated, and a few secondary systems blew out. But the humans held firm. With one last command from Captain Solis, the Hyperlance had spit forth a concentrated beam that tore through the harrowing spear's forward shield array. The white line of a crackling beam sheared the hull, igniting secondary explosions in the flagship's power conduits. Fire bursts from open sections. On the command deck, Kevith sensed his ultimate power would soon be dented iron. His subordinates were gripped by terror. Just before the coup de grace struck, the beleaguered harrowing spear managed to unleash one last volley, some of which scored hits along the Solaris Dawn's port side. A flash of sparks, and the Terran dreadnought shuddered around him as a shield generator was lost. A brittle moment hung in the air. Both ships stood ready to rip each other apart in a heartbeat. The Solaris Dawn had advanced systems that registered, however, while the hull of the harrowing spear gaped as the chain reaction tore it apart. In a brilliant flash, the entire prow of the flagship exploded, blowing crew and equipment into space. The vacuum swallowed Kevitha's last bellow. That one act, the blasting apart of the flagship of the Western Fleet, thundered across every Unthari channel that wasn't dead yet. Even admirals far beyond Veridon's maw, watching the invasion from afar, heard the harsh termination of Kevitha's transmissions. Within minutes, most of the surviving Unthari vessels were pulling out in a flailing, haphazard retreat, some blind jumps, others falling back to half-expected patterns. No one appeared to want to be stuck in the crosshairs of the landlocked Terran warship. As the battle dragged on, the battered corpses of the Empire's once grand fleet line either drifted aimlessly or slipped into FTL. The last communications from Unthari officers were panic requests for orders that never arrived. In a matter of hours, their invasion's unstoppable momentum had snapped. It did not so much end in a dignified withdrawal, but a desperate rush for survival. Drifting amidst the cosmic wreckage, the Solaris Dawn remorselessly surveyed the carnage. Captain Solis had a weary, triumphant look on his face. They had held on so long without it, the Terran rebels, but now the galaxy's fate, for the second time, might be in their hands. Scattered all around were the wrecks of Unthari warships, once nigh invulnerable, now deathly silent. The unimaginable defeat of their warship had sent their higher-ups into a tailspin, leaving them more exposed than they'd ever envisioned. The Veridon star pulsed with muted intensity as the riven remnants of the Unthari Western Fleet dispersed in every direction. Through the system's churning asteroid fields and irradiated anomalies, hundreds of alien vessels fled, some venting plasma, others with entire chunks of hull missing. As they frantically withdrew, they left a once-humming region of unstoppable power in silence, punctuated only by the crackle of errant transmissions and the distant hiss of venting gases. On board the Solaris Dawn, Captain Nadia Solis and her crew found themselves on the brink of an outcome that no one had predicted. They had already destroyed the Empire's largest invasion fleet with one ship. On the bridge, alarms still flashed from the last confrontation, but the immediate threat was eliminated. Engineering teams scrambled to stabilize the disabled port shield generator, and medics tended to burn arms and minor concussions from shockwaves. But casting a shadow over the weariness was an enormous exhilaration. "Captain," Lieutenant Mahir said in a low voice, "enemy scanners do not register much activity around us. The rest of the Unthari ships appear to have jumped out or gone dark." Solis exhaled and let her shoulders sag. "Let's verify the system is secure, and then we'll toast the resistance on Veridon's maw. We need them to know we're safe." Within moments, communications from the rebel colonies flooded in with disbelief and thanks. The primary channel, replete with static-studded voices, echoed the same incredulous refrain. The Unthari invasion had been beaten back. The empire that simply could not be stopped had met with a setback. It looked like crowds outside bunkers were cheering at the unthinkable news. For many humans who'd spent years dreading the Empire's wrath, it seemed like waking from a long nightmare. Once the dust had settled, Admiral Portia Dresden, commander of the largest rebel cell on Veridon's third moon, called an emergency meeting on the Solaris Dawn to figure out the next steps. Shortly thereafter, a small shuttle ferried her and a handful of other rebel officers to the Dreadnought's hangar bay. Dresden, a wry, older woman with steel-gray hair and a prosthetic arm, conveyed the mix of exhaustion and fierce pride that characterized the rebellion the moment she stepped onto the ship. "Captain Solis," Dresden said, saluting in a military sign almost anachronistic by now. "I never thought I'd see the day we pushed the whole Western Fleet back. And thank you, from every human colony from here to Kestrel's Edge." "You can thank the entire crew, Admiral," Solis replied, "and the sacrifices of so many that made this ship possible. But we cannot afford to be complacent. The Empire will strike back. They won't allow this humiliation to stand." Dresden nodded gravely. "Agreed. Let's use this window to consolidate. We have intercepted a few of their crippled vessels. We may be able to gather intelligence about other Unthari formations or weaknesses, not to mention the fact we destroyed Kevitha's flagship, which might spark a power struggle within the Empire." They withdrew to the Dreadnought's tactical briefing room, a room that was encircled by hollow panels that displayed the current system layout and up-to-date scans of the surrounding area. The rebellion's intelligence officers piped in over comm link, explaining how the Unthari had constructed their chain of command on fear and intimidation. With Kevith dead and countless high commanders either missing or disgraced, the Empire would be scurrying trying to keep the fact that they had been bested by a single Terran warship from getting out. All the same, Captain Solis stressed, the Empire is vast. We can't count on them to collapse overnight. Our best chance is to keep them on their toes, to make other species know the Unthari can be hurt. Hours later, the Solaris Dawn glided nearer to Veridon's largest colony, where it hovered in low orbit like a guardian. The beleaguered ground forces of the rebels counted salvaged gear, both rejoicing in a watershed moment and stealing for possible aftershocks. In spare moments of reprieve, they dared to speak of a new era, one in which humanity might not just endure, but potentially influence the course of galactic politics. Boiling across Veridon's maw, the echoes of the Empire's defeat rang. On their capital world of Rigelos the Unthari, High Command met for an emergency session. The Emperor Satrak, Mzin himself, demanded answers. How could one Terran vessel cause the destruction of our Western fleet? Where was the genius of Admiral Kevith? Why was our next-generation communications penetrated so easily? Panicked fleet commanders provided conflicting accounts. There were those who suspected the Terrans must have formed a coalition with advanced species. Others theorized that humans had uncovered ancient technology from a ruined empire. The absence of anyone having sure answers only furthered the sense of crisis. The subjugated worlds caught wind of the confusion, and their whispers turned to open revolt. With Kevith gone and the Empire's morale the lowest in history, local governors wondered whether they could hold the line. A bloodthirsty strategist, Supreme Executor Trilak had kept the throne in power for decades, and now he was suggesting an immediate blackout of information. "We're going to have to quarantine all data on the Veridon fiasco. If the galaxy finds out humans, a so-called minor race, defeated an Imperial flagship, will be an open rebellion on every front." Emperor Satrak agreed in principle, but the rumors were already circulating through black market channels. No empire, however repressive, could completely stifle the subspace gossip networks. At Veridon's maw, the rebel leadership knew about the importance of their victory. Admiral Dresden led a drive to make the events known far and wide, that the subjugated worlds and neutral observers alike knew that the unstoppable Unthari Empire had taken a shattering blow. In grainy footage, the Solaris Dawn devastated several capital ships. Audio clips played of panicked alien voices, explaining what they described as a meltdown of their command structure. It was short and electrifying. The message, "We fought back, and we won." The effect was immediate. On the fringe worlds of the Empire, rumblings of rebellion flickered to life, attacking local garrisons. On the galactic black markets, it was smugglers who brought other new rumors, that the humans had unstoppable super tech. Even a handful of minor alien states with treaties with the Unthari began to quietly reevaluate their alliances, suspecting that the Empire would no longer be the winning side. Captain Solis took in these developments each day with a mix of hope and caution. "We've landed a blow," she told her crew in a meeting. But we need to stay vigilant. The Empire is still able to bring together forces from other fleets. We might see a second wave, or they could pursue a different strategy, such as sabotage or infiltration. The Solaris Dawn itself needed massive repairs. The shield generator for the port had been heavily dented, but a few plates on the hull were flatted at worst, and the hyperlance was powered down for the time being as the focusing array was retrofitted. Normally, such repairs could take weeks in a fully equipped shipyard. But the rebellion possessed only makeshift facilities. So engineering teams labored day and night, stripping equipment from a captured Unthry frigate for parts. Rebel ground crews, meanwhile, contributed whatever they could scrounge to bring the dreadnought back to combat-ready status. As asked, the damaged Terran corvettes and gunboats regrouped around Solaris Dawn into a small but effective flotilla. Despite all the chaos and how the united Terran front had splintered into a jigsaw, this warship had united them. Fleet-wide briefings hammered home the point that a single victory, however monumental, had not ended the war. They had to stay strategic, keep the Empire in disarray, and recruit other oppressed species to their cause. In the wake of the battle, Unthry officials all but disappeared from the region. Their posts along and near Veridon's Maw were silenced or abandoned. Terran scout ships found abandoned Imperial stations for scattered months, as though the crews had been called back in a hurry. Some thought that the Empire would launch a full retaliation. Others speculated that the government was too fractured to get its act together. Finally, a week of high-stakes court-sitting Bushido came to an end when an emaciated Unthry corvette appeared, white flag racing. Out from a corp of compact AI-fast Unthry to put in request for parley. Don't you all dare shoot at me like, demanding access to Terran leadership. Suspicious but intrigued, Admiral Dresden let the corvette dock with a rebel station. Its envoy, a low-level functionary named Rekshur, brought a half-baked proposal. The Empire would overlook the incident at Veridon's Maw if the Terrans turned over the Solaris Dawn and paid tributes. Among the rebels, the reaction was unanimous. Laughter at the arrogance, the attempted intimidation. The reply was delivered by Captain Solis himself. We reject your offer. If your Empire opts for more aggression, you get the same result. Rekshur's mandibles quivered at the veiled threat. His later withdrawal merely proved the Empire's tightness of conviction. Now, with the Unthry presence in tatters, the settlers on Veridon's Maw even dared to dream of Jason's free oppression. Families emerged from bomb shelters. Children for whom the sky had never appeared unthreatened by warships dared to run in the open. Scenes of relief and low-key celebration broke out in city squares. As the rebels consolidated, the magnitude of their achievement gradually sunk in. Even so, Captain Solis did not sit on his laurels here. She knew that a wounded beast was often the most dangerous. The Empire had taken a humiliating hit, and the worst danger now was that they'd retaliate with an even larger army. Her first priority was forging the alliances, repairing the Solaris Dawn, and building on that momentum to ensure that one lucky victory became a more sweeping resurgence. Still, symbolism won out for sure. For the first time in centuries, the unstoppable machinery of an alien empire had sputtered to a stop, undone by a trivial species' resourcefulness and resolve. The collapse of the alien command, springboard machine-wired and abysmally behind and furiously backdoored, would turn, in retrospect, to be the turning point in what would be known by historians as the crack in the claw, or how the Unthry's three-claw insignia did not appear so invulnerable after all. Across the ravaged system, discarded wreckage from fallen capital ships floated like memorials to the Empire's hubris. A glimmering debris ring surrounded it, a spectral sign that even the might of the Unthry Empire's peak, the harrowing spear, could be defeated. And inside the hearts of millions of survivors among humanity, a new belief was born that if they could resist the Empire's yoke here, they could do so once more, and again, until the entire wicked system fell. So it was that Veridon's Maw, a place that would forever be burned into the pages of history, through the eyes of aliens where command devolved into chaos and, finally, disillusionment before the rampaging hull of a single, unexpected ship of humanity. In those star-specked moments, the galaxy's destiny was upended with a single blow. In the weeks and months thereafter, The seismic fallout of the Solaris Dawn's triumph over the Unthree Western Fleet spread throughout the galaxy. Once muted star systems that thrived under the Empire's yoke now burst with life at the news. There were minor uprisings, as native cohorts reawakened to the stunning fact that the invincible lords had been struck down, vanquished by a race that only to them had seemed a mere nuisance, unimportant and sterile. Inside the Unthree capital at Rigelos, Emperor Satrak Mzen began purging officers linked to the Western Fleet disaster. Scores of admirals were demoted or jailed for gross incompetence. Some disappeared without a trace, believed to have been executed. The ruling class of the Empire became increasingly demoralized, breeding ever more corrosive intrigues. Factions formed, some urging a more forgiving governorship, others calling for a total war to finally extinguish humanity. In the meantime, the surviving admirals from Veridon's Maw bickered amongst themselves, each blaming the other for the meltdown in command. Fear and distrust fractured their once unified military structure. No one wanted to take the chance of a direct confrontation with warships that could methodically tear apart entire fleets. On Titanii Veridon's Maw, reconstruction efforts were underway. Now liberated from the dangers of orbital bombardment, colonists cleared away debris and began re-establishing infrastructure. The tattered Terran ships, used for years as a ragtag defense fleet, were fitted with new technology harvested from the ruins of fallen Unthree vessels. Each salvage run revealed more pieces of alien technology, which the Terrans smartly grafted into their designs. The Solaris Dawn became a legend across human space. Captain Nadia Solis and her crew were heroes who had rewritten the course of interstellar history. But the Dreadnought, though it had been thoroughly put through the ringer by the battle, it required a massive overhaul to bring its hyperlance and shield arrays back to full efficacy, remained living proof that humanity could compete on an equal footing with the galaxy's most feared empire. It drew visitors from other species, some under the heel of the Unthree, who came to Veridon's Maw to barter alliances and treaties. They provided resources, technical expertise, and intelligence on weaknesses in the empire. For the first time, an actual multi-species coalition began to coalesce around the notion that the Unthree could be contested if only the appropriate technology and tactics were employed. Humans were no longer the underdogs. They were improbable champions, beating the unstoppable armada. In the crowded hallways of the rebel headquarters, Admiral Portia Dresden held daily briefings assessing the optimal use of this momentous opportunity. Her new plan had focused on coordinated strikes against lightly defended Unthree outposts and building up a network of resistance cells and systems that had never before tasted hope. "We have to keep them on the defensive," she would say, repeating the strategy Captain Solis had preached. "They will regroup if we let them. But if we put steady pressure on them, more worlds will rise up against them." The galaxy took note. Shipping lanes opened up for merchant guilds operating near Unthree space as the Empire's patrols retired to and concentrated around critical strongholds. The overlords who once could not be touched had to reconsolidate. Diplomats from distant star nations observed with concern, recalibrating alliances. Though some claimed the Unthree Empire wounded, not dead, it was evident to most that the age of unopposed expansion was over. For Captain Solis and her crew, their win at Veridon's Maw had a personal aspect. They had saved not one system from destruction, but had reinvigorated the spirit of humanity through old rivalries of the Terran enclaves. In the Solaris Dawn's mess hall, weary crew members recounted tales of old battles lost and new ones potentially won. "We're not the underdogs anymore," Mechanic Ingwe, an immigrant from Earth's last independent colony, joked. "We're top dog, for now, at least, until the Empire's next move." Guffaws blended with a sobering recognition that future encounters could be far worse. And thus, the start of a new chapter in the era of mankind, as the alien authority collapsed before the might of a single dreadnought's interference. The ceasefire lines had transformed, the unstoppable tide of conquest stymied. A myth broken was far more damaging than the loss of fleets and resources. Already the Unthree were a technologically deathless species. Human fighters who had once fought with desperation now fought with reinvigorated purpose. Strategists who had been compelled to think small now envisioned possibilities on a grand scale. The message was clear. If the empire bled once, it could bleed again. Where tyranny had appeared to be everlasting, a crack of hope formed. The destruction of Admiral Kevitha's command had not only been a military victory, it was a harbinger of a new age, when the lesser species of the galaxy might at last end their bondage. As for the Solaris Dawn, it sailed from Veridon's maw cloaked in a sacred oath to protect the free realms and unravel the Empire's grip upon the Orion Quadrant. The dreadnought had followed everywhere a hush of reverence. The Unthari were powerful, but no one was invincible, and no one was immortal. And the awe that once inspired worship to some became a testament to their ability to be struck down by mortal hands. Maybe the most significant transformation happened in the hearts of everyday folks. Of the black-hulled human warship that one day splintered an alien armada in two, in dozens of hells, on newly liberated worlds, children could hear themselves grow up. They learned that, through courage and ingenuity and unity, no empire, however ancient, was invincible. The last legacy of that day was the making of a new destiny for man, ignored no longer, but unquenchable in spirit. It was only a few short steps, and by the time we were running with our ships, the galaxy was on the edge of a new age, and mankind wanted its share.